Whoa, hopefully you noticed that intro was a little bit different, and you know what that means. Today, we are going to slap a little sticker over here and do Jim versus the man. Our guests are backstage and they look to be prepared to go. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of this hill garbage, and we're going to get to our guests. Hello, what's going on, guys?
What's going on? We weren't expecting to come to you from the car today, but it is freezing cold.
And raining all night.
Yeah, it's pretty
We're
nice.
in Oregon, so par for the course.
Yeah, no doubt. So you're cold. What's the temperature? How cold is it?
Well, the closest weather station is in town, and it was getting down to like low 40s, and we're actually probably like 1,500 to 2,000 feet higher than that. So I bet you it was getting into the 30s last night.
Got pretty chilly. Definitely could see your breath, but I like camping in this brisk weather.
It's warm during the day, so that's good, but it's still kind of early here, so
it's fun. It's fun, and we're camping, of course. I know Jim knows. I don't know if the audience knows, but Harvey, the RV, broke down.
We're very sad about it.
Back in June, but we were dedicated to getting ourselves up here to Oregon anyway. So, contingency plan, camping in the woods, and it's been kind of nice. Yeah. Actually, we got up here in the Oregon area right when the wildfires started burning, so it was real smoky and gross. But the tour rages on. We wish.
Yeah, I saw your guys's like live streams and everything going through them with all the smoke everywhere. Like you were saying, it's all smoky here and it's not from weed.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, man. Like it seems like it's happening every summer where the Pacific Northwest just burns, and this time coming through, I've been in and out of this area for 20 years, and this is probably the worst I've ever seen the smoke. You couldn't see a few blocks down the road. And yeah, it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, we did an article just the other day that was saying that 5 out of 6 of California's worst and biggest wildfires have been this season.
Yeah, and we actually stopped in California near Reed, California, and we were going to go camping out there. And it was right like an hour before we got to our campsite. The state of California, the entire state, closed down all the national forests and kicked all the campers out. So we ended up just hightailing it all the way to Oregon because they hadn't done that yet.
Yeah. Oh, and to kind of back up a little bit, we are in Oregon on the More Tour. And the More Tour is centered around, they had this awesome bill going through Congress that actually Kamala Harris introduced. Called the MORE Act, and it's going to take cannabis off the Controlled Substance Act, which is incredible because there's no reason that a plant should be listed on this dangerous substance list. There's been a lot of bills that have gone through for rescheduling it, but this one sees to deschedule completely, which is great. There was supposed to be a vote on that act on the 21st, but the Senate Democrats, same party that introduced the bill, decided to postpone and block the bill again, which is
until after the election.
Until surprise after. So they're just dangling that carrot of freedom in front of our faces as usual. We came up here to participate in the It's About Time March, which was a nationwide demonstration thought up by the director of Memphis Normal. So this wasn't a normal event, but it was, thought up by a normal board member. And people took to the streets, it wasn't huge, but this is something that happened in like 2 weeks time. So a couple hundred people across the country got together in different cities. Unfortunately, Portland was totally smoked out, like not even the BLM.
Yeah, they were even staying put. And you brought up the BLM, and it's a good caveat. Like a lot of our protests have been outshadowed by the BLM protests and whatnot. But there was still a cannabis march, and in tons of cities around the nation, people were out there marching for the MORE Act. And again, in Portland, it was all smoked out and got canceled. The BLM protesters weren't even out and about. And as soon as the smoke cleared, guess what? They were out and about.
Everybody was back out.
They were back out there.
And to your comment of like being overshadowed, the cannabis, the legalization movement in general being overshadowed by the BLM, they're one and the same. And I'm starting to see more and more articles in the the big media outlets about how ending the war on drugs could absolutely, if not overnight, stop this police brutality issue that we're facing. We've got a prison population that's comprised of almost 70% nonviolent victimless offenders. 40% of them are in there for simple drug possession, didn't hurt anybody. They either had weed or speed or acid. I don't care. They had some sort of substance on them, be they addicted or not. They ended up getting put in jail for it, at the expense of the taxpayers, of course, which is interesting. We're paying for that. And that's what gives these cops the excuse to approach primarily the minority community and say, oh, you fit the description of somebody who might have crack on you. So we're going to come and we're going to make you uncomfortable. We're going to interrogate you, ask you all sorts of questions, step on your rights, because we know that public schools didn't teach you your rights. And we're going to hope that you cave to us. If you don't, we're going to beat the shit out of you in the middle of broad daylight and you're going to take it. And
in fact, if you look at the police shootings of unarmed minorities in the last 5 years, you can associate them all with the drug war. At some point, the police were approaching that person because they suspected of drug use or drug possession. And you take that out of the equation, you're not going to see the police brutality that we're seeing. You're not going to see the BLM riots. You're going to see just like an open market, just like you see with cannabis in legal states.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're going to see police officers who actually are serving and protecting their communities. They're actually going after violent crimes. What's the clearance rate? You looked it up.
So yeah, I was looking up the clearance rates of crimes in America, and this is a nationwide statistics brought to you by the FBI. And for the drug war, the clearance rate, meaning that they've solved the crime and they have a suspect in custody, or at least a suspect that they're going to arrest. The clearance rates for the drug war is right around 90%. So for the drug war, drug crimes, they solve most of those. But if you look at homicide, it's like a 50-50 shot in America whether that crime's then get solved. For rape, it's even lower. It's like 30%. So you have sex crimes, a lot of them children, and these crimes are not getting solved because we're spending so much of our tax dollars on the drug war. If you look at property crimes, car theft, it's low also. Teens in some places. So we are, as taxpayers, spending our money to have law enforcement approach nonviolent people and put them in jail, as opposed to solving crimes that actually create victims. Yeah, you've put it up. Bingo. There it is. And how disgusting is that in a free nation? I don't know any American that should be okay with that.
And that's even more disgusting, not to make a pun on the MORE Act, but, this bill that is been postponed. I'm kind of happy it has, because one thing that's in the fine print that the mainstream media isn't blasting everywhere. Sure, it's going to take cannabis off the controlled substance list, but it's also going to tax at a 5% federal level. Everybody knows libertarians hate federal taxes. I'm not even going to go into that. We're just going to accept this because we have to, and this is how it is right now for what I'm getting ready to lay out. So they're going to take 5% on top of whatever the state taxes already are from legal cannabis consumers. They're going to take 5% of that money, and 50% of it is actually going right back to the DOJ, which is going to end up right back in the hands of police so that they can continue the war on drugs just without weed involved. So the weed smokers, the legal weed smokers who are already going to be overcharged, overtaxed, and Lord knows how strictly regulated, are now going to be footing a continued bill on drugs or war on drugs. And I'm just, G.I. Mary Jane does not approve of this measure. Everybody's, but it's a start. It's not a start. Once it gets put into effect, it's going to be real hard to change. And when it does change, that 5% tax is going to go up. Look what happened to alcohol, tobacco.
Mm-hmm. Any sin tax that you see throughout history, it always started low. That's how it begins. And then the sin tax end up going higher and higher and higher. And right now, we're only seeing a 5% tax on cannabis users. But if you think about it, like, cannabis users are already funding the war on drugs through civil asset forfeiture, through the court costs that they have to pay, that goes right back into law enforcement. All they're doing is shifting that cost from the black market and civil asset forfeiture, and they're shifting it to taxes. That way cannabis users can continue to fund the war on drugs. And I don't know why cannabis users would be okay with that. Even if you don't agree with the other drugs that are out there, you know what it's like to be a victimless offender and be approached by police and taken to jail. A lot of them do. I've been in that situation, and I can't morally condone a tax that does that to other people.
And I can't even morally condone Biden made reference to, oh, well, instead of arresting people for drugs, we're going to throw them in rehab. Look, Uncle Joe. Okay, here's the thing is possession and addiction are two very, very extremely different things. And when you throw somebody in jail for having a joint, okay, when it's not overtaking their lives, when it's not, and I'll go out and say it, yes, this can become a problem to people. Sugar, shopping, chocolate can become problems. The McDonald's, gambling, anything can become an addiction. Once it does, you know, what you need is you need direction to compassionate care. But to throw somebody in a rehab facility
by force,
who isn't addicted and introduce them to people who do have addiction issues, what do you think is going to happen, Jim?
It's going to get worse. I think the article should have read, Joe Biden wants to change the name of jail for cannabis users.
To rehab.
And we're going to fluff it up and make it sound better for you.
And I get
jail for them and call it rehab.
Exactly. And I get where they're coming from, because if you look at cities like San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, you'll see where they've decriminalized a lot of drugs and the police aren't really enforcing the drug laws in those areas, but they did not put in place mental health for these people. They did not put in place getting these people homes. None of these things were put in place. So basically it's like the Wild West with drugs, except now we have more addiction problems in America than we ever did in the Wild West. And these people have no homes. So if you go to these areas, you're going to see the result of decriminalizing drugs, but not putting services in place for these human beings, these Americans who are struggling with addiction.
And not only services in place, but allowing for a market to start to evolve. I mean, people need safe access to whatever it is they want to use. I'll go to the heroin argument, because if you remember back in the day, right, we had a problem with opium dens. There was this whole thing, this huge movement. Wives were taking to the streets because their husbands were at the opium den too much and they hated it, right? We criminalized opium, right? When we criminalized cocaine and cannabis and everything else, right around 1937 is when it all got out of control. When those opium dens disappeared, all of a sudden, America had this new substance on the street called heroin, because it was easier to shuffle around.
It wasn't illegal yet.
It wasn't illegal yet. And that's when people started, you know, seeing bigger issues with that substance, when you denied them safe access to nature. Am I condoning the use of opium or heroin? No. Gonna say it's not my thing, just not anything I'd ever want to try. But if somebody out there wants to, God damn it, they have the right to, without being put in jail and demonized for it.
And the reality is, when they got rid of opium, we ended up with opiates and heroin. When they made those legal, now that it's killing people more than opium ever did.
We saw it with weed, with the vape crisis. People were getting vape cartridge things from overseas that weren't regulated, weren't safe, and they have BPA in them and this, that, and whatever other chemical. It wasn't the processors. It was.
You'll see it. You see it with salvia too. Remember when salvia was technically legal? You get over the counter, it's making people jump out of windows. Anytime you end up taking something and putting it into the black market, you create a science where people are trying to make alternatives to that drug. And that's why we went from cocaine to crack to meth. That's why we went from opium to opiates to fentanyl. Like, we're going to see it in every substance that we try to ban, and we're going to try to find loopholes in it to make that high legal. So instead of just banning it and moving these markets to an unsafe, illegal black market, why not keep it into the free market? Let the people decide what they're going to do with their own bodies.
Yeah.
And that's why we're on the
Imagine if everybody, like right now, the criminalization of it has the sheeple, if you will, judging people that are on heroin as bad people, as, you know what I mean, criminals or whatnot, because it's criminalized. But imagine if the majority of people that saw heroin users showed compassion and treated them like they had a problem, instead of like they're trash that needs to be thrown away immediately.
Imagine if we treated it like a mental health disorder.
To the heroin user, if everybody's like, oh, fuck you, you're so bad and you shouldn't be doing this, that they're not going to respond well to that. But if everywhere they went, people were showing compassion and expressing the desire to help them, they're highly more likely to eventually one of those people in their lives they're going to listen to, and they're going to follow, and they're going to most likely get off of heroin a lot easier than trying to force them off. You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. And what it is we dehumanize addiction, right? And you'll see it with troops in combat. They have to dehumanize their enemy so that way they can do their job. And we dehumanize addicts, and we associate the crimes that some addicts commit, the violent crimes that some addicts commit, with all addicts. And it's how we justify putting these people in jail and separating them from society. But you're absolutely right. What if we treated it like a mental health disorder, which it is? It's in the DSM listed as a mental health disorder, addiction. What if we treated it like that instead of a criminal condition? Imagine how different the world would be. And these people who are trying to recover from their addiction, they need a population that's going to accept them back in it. Right now, we're not. And we want these people to reintegrate into society, but then we don't let them. We've taken away their right to vote in a lot of cases. We've taken away their right to defend themselves with guns. We've taken away their ability to get good housing or even a good job because we have background checks that bring up a mental health disorder that we've all dehumanized. And then how are these people really supposed to reintegrate?
Be able to get any of that stuff too.
You can't. I mean, there's no way.
It is a life sentence, and it's cruel and unusual, which we are supposed to have protections of in the Constitution.
If you look at it, and I've often wondered, like, is it better? And this happens to some people. They get so sick of this in and out and this, being dehumanized, not being able to find a job, being in a small town, getting caught with a joint. All of a sudden, they're like, Satan in the flesh to their entire community.
And their mugshots put all over the news.
They can't get a job. They can't get a house. They can't, be active in their children's school because the PTA completely shuns them and dismisses them. Meanwhile, they're
a lot of times
drinking.
They lose their kids in court custody cases.
And a lot of times they decide that jail's a better place for them because at least they're getting fed and at least they're getting housed and at least they're getting a bed. And then you get into these serial criminals, and I don't like that word because they're not criminals. They're people who have been completely dismissed unfairly from society. But that's real. That's so real that it was depicted in freaking the Andy Griffith show back in the day. You had that town drunk that was intentionally getting arrested because the town just bothered him so. Remember, and Andy was the only one who was kind to him, and Andy was the only one who got. What was that guy's name?
I don't remember.
I'm totally showing my age. Otis. Otis was the town drunk, and like the moral of that whole story was the cops were supposed to be good, and I really wish we could have that Andy Griffith beat cop. Protect the community and
you
care.
Get rid of the war on drugs, you'll have police that are only enforcing and investigating crimes that created victims, and that's what we need.
And when they catch Otis, when they catch the drunk, which might be the heroin addict, they take him to a hospital, they let him sober up, and then they let him go back to his family and hope he's got the support system there to get through whatever it is he needs to get through. Or maybe he's not going through anything. Maybe he's just somebody who does that every now and then and it's okay. We are not anyone to judge. That is only for the individual. But criminalizing these things isn't going to help. And that's why we call it Platoon 420. Because like you said, the dehumanization, this war is absolutely a tactical war that has been played out.
They've declared war on peaceful American citizens. They've literally declared war on us. Our government declared a war on drugs. And these are people who haven't created victims, and we haven't fought back. We haven't created a resistance, of not a very strong one. We have with cannabis, and you can see that unfolding right in front of us. And you're going to start seeing it with mushrooms too. And until it's fair across the board, like the war rages on, and we have POWs sitting in prison right now for all sorts of different victimless crimes. Like G.I. Mary Jane said, it's 60% of the prison population is filled with nonviolent offenders that we're footing the bill to take care of their health care, their education, their income, because they do work, even though they don't get paid very well. They're basically slaves. We're footing the bill for that.
They could be in our communities being productive members of society instead of causing, this situation, instead of creating this situation where the lawmakers have a right to say, well, we got to charge more taxes because there's so much, there's so many criminals,
so many people in prison,
many people locked up. Well, then let them go. Free them. Let them go work at those minimum wage jobs that everybody complains about they don't want, because those people would be grateful to have any one of those jobs. let them go work at the food banks if they can't find a paying job, because they'd be grateful to volunteer for their community. We're removing those people. We're affecting ourselves negatively. I mean, people need to realize, by shaming these people instead of being compassionate, and you can be compassionate and still say, I'm not okay with, your addiction.
Right. You don't have to condone their addiction, but you can still be compassionate. And whether you like it or not, these people are in our neighborhoods. I don't care what class of society you're in. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your race is. Addiction focuses not on any of those demographics. It just hits human beings. So these people are in your neighborhoods. They are your neighbors, maybe even your family members. And our society has trained us to treat them like they're a problem instead of treating them like they are human beings. They're not going anywhere. And we can have that one or two ways. We can help them reintegrate into society, like she said, to be productive members, or we can shun them and our homeless camps will grow. And it's really on us as a society, not one individual, but as a group, to change our culture and how we think about addiction and drugs. And in turn, it'll change our government, because we'll vote that way, hopefully, in theory.
Numbers around the corner.
Social pressure is powerful against the government. Mm-hmm. You're seeing it right now with the BLM movement. Social pressure is very powerful.
Oh yeah, I believe that.
We'll probably be seeing you soon, with any luck. I guess we're getting.
Yeah, I was gonna say this more tour. Since the thing got postponed, you guys said you're still going ahead with what you already had planned. Is that what you're saying? You're gonna go to?
Yeah, we're going to extend the More Tour and try to link up with some farms and grows. And we've already linked up with dispensaries and posted them on our YouTube, our Facebook. And we're going to continue on and head south for the winter, because it's too damn cold in Oregon, man. It snows here. And by the end of this month, it could be snow here. Who knows? So we're going to fly south like little birdies and
snowbirds,
and continue on the More Tour and try to link up with some farms and dispensaries. We're going to go to Pete and Helen's. You can go ahead and plug them.
To Mother Nature's Den. Well, let me back up and just real quick synopsis of where we started in Colorado Springs. We went back down to Taos, New Mexico to deal with Harvey for a moment. She's still sitting there.
Harvey the RV.
Then we went on to Breckenridge, Colorado, and headed on west from there, where we visited the highest dispensary on the planet, which is located in the highest incorporated town in North America, Alma, Colorado.
And we bought the highest THC level at the highest dispensary, and then we got the highest.
Yeah, and arguably at the highest prices I've ever seen in Colorado, too. Good Lord. We got a gram.
Yeah, we bought a gram. It was like
$22 or something. It was insane. But I think they know that. How do you not go there and visit and do all that? Then we booked through Utah, like terrified. And this is another reason why we're on the More Tour. Is we're safe because I'm a patient. And a lot of states that have medical cannabis laws, which Utah does, have what's called reciprocity, which should go without saying, right? That they will respect me, a Colorado patient, traveling through Utah with my medicine. They won't let me buy it, won't let me sell it, but they're not going to throw me in jail simply for driving through their state and having my legal medicine on me from anywhere, Colorado, Maryland, Nevada. I don't care what state you're from. However, that's up to the guy on the side of the road. Like, we've all been there. The cop can put you in cuffs for any reason. The judge will sort it out later. So there's still that paranoia of, oh my God,
yeah, we booked it through Utah so fast. We made it across that state in like a day. We hit the Bonneville Salt Flats, and it was like 60-mile-an-hour winds in our little Honda Civic. And then we parked for the night right across the border in Nevada, which is the legal state. And we saw on the news that it was like hurricane speed winds coming through that area, 150 mile an hours. And so we beat that.
There were gas tankers flipped over on the side of the road. So by the grace of the canna gods, we made it through there safely without incident, both on the prohibition end and the Mother Nature end.
I heard you telling your story about driving in those high winds And I've experienced this before, so I knew when you were telling it how you're in that tiny little car, and then when you drive next to a semi, the gap in wind, like, oh man,
She
that's
was
scary
scared.
sometimes. Yeah,
Careful.
you
So
really
scared.
feel it
And
sometimes when it's high
yeah,
wind.
GI Mary Jane was pretty scared, and I didn't want to show her how nervous I was.
You did great.
Because I didn't want her
You
to
were
freak
clenched up
out.
real tight, probably.
But yeah, man, I was a little white knuckled on that steering wheel in this little like 2,000-pound Honda Civic. And some of the semi trucks were parked on the side of the road. So when you'd go into that little vacuum that it created, the wind block, it would just shoot you sideways. And then you
Towards
pass
the
it,
semi.
the wind would blow you back into your lane. And it really put me into the other lane. Thankfully, there was no one there. But that was a pretty daunting drive.
Yeah.
Then we went through Reno. Which
Quickly.
Quite quickly. Which is pretty, and then went to Weed, California.
Oh yeah, we pulled into Weed, California, literally like 3 minutes prior to 420 with zero plans of doing it. I mean, we just trotted along. We stopped a whole bunch of places to like get pictures of the overlooks and stuff, and then oh shit, it's almost 420 and we're pulling into Weed. So we were able to share that with the Facebook universe live
and
YouTube, which was fun. Thank you, technology. And then the plan was to end in Portland. The march, like I said, got smoked out, but we did do some relief efforts with some pretty actionable groups.
Yep, for the fires. We had to feed these people.
Yeah, this started as tribal relief efforts for the Columbia River area tribes out here. Thousands of pounds of fish and produce was shipped into different trucks. And we spent time bundled up like little Eskimos in this freezer truck, packing frozen fish and carrots away in bags, prepackaged bags that were then eventually distributed to these tribes. And then we finally got settled. And we're working on phase 2. And the first thing we did, which was kind of crazy, we thought, was we reviewed the Jim Belushi's Blues Brothers joints, which were delicious.
Yeah.
Itty bitty, but they burned so slow it didn't matter. It's really crazy.
It was like 0.25 grams per joint.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, Jim Belushi owns a farm out here, but they burned really slow and they were really stony. I was pretty impressed.
Yeah. So we reached out to his PR lady, and she was quick to get back with us. We reached out. We wanted to know if we could visit the farm while we were there, and introduced ourselves, and she said, Jim's doing some relief work right now around the fires. And I'm like, oh, we just got done doing that. Is there any volunteer opportunities with them? What about a walkthrough of the farm? Unfortunately, COVID has thwarted that too. She reported that because of COVID, they can't have any unbadged visitors to the farm. If we were in Colorado, I do have a badge in the Colorado industry. We could visit there, but I don't have a badge in the Oregon industry. So unfortunately, you can't walk through.
Just your card? A weed card?
No, see, not only do you have to pay the government to allow you to smoke weed in some states, you have to pay the government to allow you to work at minimum wage in the weed industry. So for $500 a year in Colorado, you have to get called what's called an industry badge. And there's different tiers of this. Like if you're the boss man, you got to pay way more and get like the gold level badge. Yeah, face palm all day long.
It's like a food handler's card if you work in the restaurant industry, where you have to go get permission to work in the food industry and get a food handler's card.
Qualified,
yeah. Or you have to take an online class, which costs like $100, I think. Might be a little bit less than that, but you take an online class and then you take a test, which is like so easy a caveman can do it. So you'd be good, Jim. And then they give you a card and give you permission to work at minimum wage to go trim weed.
Now, where you're supposed to come up with this money before you have the job, is beyond me, but such is government, right? You can't sell the lemonade until you get the permit.
The permission.
They do this with the adult entertainment industry in Vegas. You have to pay the state, and that's weird because that industry is one of the, anonymous type things. Not everybody wants to be out in the open about it, but nope, you've got to go let the government know who you are and what you do, where you're at, get permission, pay them $500 every year to do it. And then you can go shake that ass, bitch, and let me see what you got. But only with the government's help,
Yeah. You'll see that in minority communities, and I'm not just going to say minority, I'm just going to say impoverished and poor communities. Everyone, if you ever go to these communities, you'll see that everyone has a hustle, right? Like everyone's got some side hustle to make money, whether that be cutting hair, for the neighborhood, whether that be being a mechanic for some extra dollars, or whether that be selling CDs on the side of the road. Everyone's got to hustle to make some money, but every single one of them is breaking the law because they never got a business license from the government. They never paid their taxes. They never got permission to get themselves out of poverty. So how are these people supposed to afford all these permission slips to get themselves out of poverty if they're in poverty? Like, the system is set up to keep them there. And you'll see that in the cannabis industry too.
It's very unfortunate. So phase 2, we're coming back down through Nevada is the plan. We're going to stop by the Garden of Freedom. We're going to need your help because this Civic is not making it down my road at all. Definitely.
Road. Dude, you just gotta keep the momentum going. You'll bounce out of them hills.
I think it'll bottom out. It's a Honda Civic, man. I don't even know how my bus made it down there that day.
It's incredible. Then we're gonna go visit Mother Nature's Den and the Yeeples. We're gonna head back and winterize Harvey the RV and make sure that he's all good to go for when we return after the snow makes its exit. And then the idea is to end in Slab City, California, where we're going to set up camp and do season 4 of the War Room on location from a very libertarian, unintentionally libertarian.
I don't even think that they realize, like, they are quite the anarchists there. And it's probably the closest to a libertarian community I've ever seen. Unfortunately, that does come with problems that aren't very well taken care of because there's no supporting, libertarian ideals from the government, but they do all right for themselves. So we're going to land there. I know a couple of camps there that have some amazing people and they're doing some really awesome stuff. So we're going to kick it around the Salton Sea and Joshua Tree and Imperial Valley for a little while. Mexico's right next door, which Mexico is probably going to be legalizing cannabis before America does.
Wow.
If you've been following that country,
that's not going to push the cartel all the way up into America. No, it's not going to. It's not going to at all send them to where.
It'll just make the cartel do other illegal stuff.
No, they're probably going to go into charity work. I think they're all going to find Christ and start being. I mean, come on.
Aren't they all Catholic?
You can't even call these unintended consequences anymore. Like, maybe in 1950, you could be like, "Oh, we fucked up with that whole war on drug thing. This is not what we meant." Now, like, after, I mean, I'm not going to say my age, but my entire life, it's been evident since childhood. I've watched my Black friends get arrested for a joint and do like 10 years, and my white friends get told to go home, and the cop just throws the joint away.
Maybe get probation.
Right? It's been so evident. The numbers, the statistics are there, and still nothing's changed. All drugs should be legalized, and there should be a market safe for all of them. A market where if somebody sells you something that is poisonous, right? Like if I buy coffee that instantly, has rat poison in it accidentally, you have recourse, right? You have legal recourse against that. You don't have that if you go buy crack and somebody put rat poison in it. So we need safe access to all of these drugs. Cannabis is a great start.
But it's not. We're not done yet. Just because cannabis is getting legal and the cannabis users are like, woohoo, we're not done because the war on drugs has continued. There's still cannabis users in prison for life to this day, and that hasn't changed. So even if the feds do legalize it nationwide, I think that we're just still not done fighting this war because there is still a war on drugs, and that's where the majority of our police funding goes. When people talk about defunding the police, you don't have to defund the police. Just defund the war on drugs.
Simple.
That'll take most of their funding away, and then they'll be free to actually investigate crimes that create victims instead of going after crimes that don't.
Yeah, and then you have people actually being held accountable for their violent crimes. Platoon 420 reports the drug war news from the perspective of the victims. We don't think it's an arrest. We think it's a kidnapping. We don't think it's a raid. It's an unlawful entry, so on and so forth.
It's not bail. It's a ransom.
It's a ransom. You did nothing wrong. But I can't tell you how many times I've read stories, and I've published 1 or 2 of them because it's very sticky. There's a domestic violence call, say, from a neighbor, right? And the cops show up, and who knows? Who knows if he's beating her ass or she's beating his ass? It goes both ways. We all know this. But either way, the cop walks in and sees the bong sitting on the table. Next thing you know, both people are in jail for weed. nobody gets held accountable for whatever the violent act was, one way or the other. So one person's obviously a victim, right? Maybe not. Maybe both of them were aggressors. That's a thing too. But either way, they become victims. And the person who is a victim doesn't get any justice. And we see that with Breonna Taylor right now. I mean, these no-knock raids that we were talking about that earlier, I'm not surprised by the judgment, okay, at all, because I know how our system works and what the laws say, and I knew they were going to find that as justifiable, right? I don't like it. But if we didn't have a war on drugs, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. We've got to stop bitching about the individual incidences. We need to recognize them and let them motivate us to go as hard in on the regulatory end with our representatives as we are out on the streets. We need to be emailing these people every single day, right? We need to be calling them. That's their job, is to communicate with us, their constituents. But I get news for you. They don't know what's going on. They're working 10 hours a fucking day, and they're being told one thing or the other from this special interest group or the other. You need to step in, you being the American people. Set up auto emails on your Gmail. Like anytime you want to go bitch on Facebook about an issue, shoot that same rant to your congressman. It's going to start making change, and we need to start being that hard on the back end as we are. If people
put as much passion into contacting their representatives as they did into bitching on Facebook about their points of views, you'd see a lot more change a lot faster. And I know that these representatives look on Facebook and they see the comments, but they're not getting those emails in their inbox. So you know what?
That happens, they ain't gonna give a shit.
Right, and you vote with your emails, you vote with your vote, and you vote with your dollars. And you know what? Do it locally if you really want to see change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'm Ganja Grunt. To give you a little bit of my background, I actually am a combat veteran. I was an infantryman in the U.S. Army, deployed to Iraq, did convoy escort. I was lead vehicle in our convoy. I came home after a year. I went back to the Middle East, to Oman, and I came home and I was using the VA for all sorts of prescription pills and to deal with my issues. And eventually weaned myself off of those and started using cannabis. And here soon I'll be releasing a beginner's guide to cannabis. I'm kind of centering it around veterans, but I think that anyone will be able to get something out of it. So stay tuned to Platoon 420 for that in the coming weeks. With the More Tour going on, we have less time to really get on the computer to bust things out and more driving, but we're going to try to get on that. So stay tuned for the beginner's guide on cannabis. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it also.
And speaking of like the lifers, the prisoners that are in jail, there's a lot of groups doing this, but we think we're going to jump on board with that. You have the idea of like, convict pen pals. We want to start doing little fundraisers to get some money on the commissaries of these people.
Sponsor a POW.
Sponsor a prisoner of the drug war.
And they did that with POWs in Vietnam. They would actually send American entertainment industry people to go there and perform for the POWs, and you could actually sponsor a POW in some way. And we're going to bring that back, but we're going to do it on the war on drugs. We're going to sponsor a POW who is in prison because of the war on drugs, and maybe put some money on their commissary, because I think these POWs deserve a Snickers bar or a phone call home, and it's the least we can do as American citizens to let them know that, you know what, we understand what's going on. We want you to reintegrate into our community, and we're going to set you up a little bit while you're there to help that happen.
And hopefully one day we can be there outside when they release you, when they release all these POWs. They keep talking shit. By they, I mean the government, be it state, federal, or what have you. But little of them have done it. Was it Ohio that released all? I think it was Chicago, maybe. I have to look that up. I should have. Some city released all of its nonviolent.
There are several cities because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and even before, there was one that did it before the pandemic, and of course we were watching just like as close as we were watching Brexit during the, you know what I mean. But the city didn't implode. It didn't.
Yeah, we interviewed somebody that was home. I think it was on Can We Talk 420, actually, Helen and Peter's show. We interviewed a guy who was home because of the Rona, but it's not as peaches and cream as they make it sound like, because number one, they're on house arrest now. So they still, yeah, that's more from being in jail. But number two, they have the looming overhead that they're going to be picked back up and put back in jail. They don't know when. Maybe they're going to be in their home for a month. They can't plan anything. You can't enjoy anything. You know what I mean? I mean, you can do all those things, but one day you just sitting there living, knowing that one day you're going to have to go right back to that stupid cage. You know what I mean?
Is that what they're doing? Are they like releasing them for a minute?
They're releasing them with the clear understanding that we can come get you back for any reason at any time.
Are they putting them in a hotel or like an Airbnb?
Yeah, where do they stay? Do they just?
Well, I don't know. The one guy in particular, he had family and he was staying at his home with his family on house arrest.
Lucky him.
So that was great. Blessed for that, obviously. But like I said, he's worried about having to go back for any reason at any time, just because they say, "Oh, okay, we're not worried about COVID no more. Get your ass back in the cage." He's still serving the sentence he's serving, even though he was let out.
He's just doing it from home.
All they did on the news was say they're let out because of COVID, but in reality, they're being given a carrot on a stick, I guess, to make themselves look good.
And that might be a little bit compassionate, considering COVID would spread very fast in the prison population or any illness. When I was in the Army, we had norovirus that swept through us in like 3 days and just took everyone out. And it's because you live in a close proximity. You're shared showers and hygiene areas, shared sleeping areas, shared eating area. So yeah, like it's super common in prisons for illnesses to just sweep through it. So that is a little compassionate. I am glad to see that during a pandemic, they let these people out of prison. And it's kind of an admission from the government that these people are not a danger to society. Yeah. Like they literally admitted it, just like they admitted that cannabis is essential in almost every single state. I think there's just one that didn't. They said that all these businesses are going to close because they're non-essential, but you know what? The dispensaries are going to stay open because this is a pandemic and people need their liquor stores and their weed. And then that's an admission from the government that this during a pandemic is essential. It's not illegal. It shouldn't be illegal in any 50 of our states and 4 territories.
And in 2021, I promise right now that I'm going to have a focus on being in the inboxes of every one of the big activist groups. I worked with NORML directly for a few years, with Americans for Safe Access and the Marijuana Policy Project, and they're all wonderful and actionable, but I feel like they fail to mention the important shit, okay? Like we have. And I'm going to be in their inboxes. I promise. Platoon 420 is reminding them of these things. Like, hey, you guys have the perfect lawsuit right here. A lawsuit, not even a bill. You have the perfect lawsuit if you've got the right legal team to make the argument that through 2020, the federal government admitted in no uncertain terms that cannabis is not only essential, but definitely not criminal. And
take it to the Supreme Court.
Take it to the Supreme Court. I think that, out of all this mess, that we'll have a good argument. And I hope the big guys focus on that.
And you saw that with gay marriage. Eventually, it wasn't some bill that was drafted through the House and Congress that legalized gay marriage. It was the Supreme Court. Someone took it to the Supreme Court and was like arguing for our constitutional rights. So there is 2 ways to make change, and one of them is by blowing up your representatives, and the other one's going to be taking it to the Supreme Court and decriminalizing drugs.
But let's face it, here we are again, back to this country is set up so that if you don't have those green cotton rectangles, you can't get the legal team together to take that case to the Supreme Court. So that's very unfortunate, but I hope that they don't Epstein the guy who gets ready to do that one day, because I know he's got to be out.
Not to mention, they also set it up in such a way that if you get caught as a drug offender, you don't get to vote anymore. Yeah, it's so literal voter suppression of these felons
Or you don't get to own a firearm. And
to take away their right to say, hey, these things shouldn't be illegal. So the only people who can really, make this change are either people who've never been caught and understand, or people who aren't addicts but are compassionate. So which one are you? And that's really what my question is to the audience. Which one of those people are you?
Yeah, it says it right there on the site. That's our slogan. We're all soldiers in the drug war. Which side are you on? And right now is, again, the time to decide. People are like, oh, civil war is happening. It is. It is. It's going on. And it's so blatantly clear to me that ending the drug war would put an immediate halt to 80% of the issues that we have with the police department and justice system.
Yeah. And
overnight.
And as far as the Civil War goes, there's a lot of things that are playing factors into that. But the BLM movements, what this divide has been it's been going on now for the last 15 years that I can remember. How many times the minority communities have had to march and riot over this.
And no one's listening or changing things.
Nothing's
changed. In terms of why are you getting mad and rioting? Well, because we've been trying, and by we, I just mean the people. This BLM movement started, of course, it started in Baltimore, really, with Freddie Gray, in a small community that grew. And Baltimore is one of the most diverse cities I've ever visited in terms of cultural diversity. You've got every race there, and there is absolutely a serious systemic racism problem in Baltimore, probably more so than the rest of the country, but the community just doesn't seem to have that, which is great. And it's spread, and now it's the people saying, give us our freedom. And we've got the media trying to blind us again with the divisiveness. And it's real important to just remind people. And that's what we've been doing everywhere we go, is discussing.
Defund the war on drugs, you'll defund the police. You'll get the exact result you're looking for. And it's that simple of a message. It really is. It's not that complicated. All the statistics are there. All the math is there. All the studies are there. Defunding the war on drugs would defund the police.
That's it.
And it would let the police investigate the crimes that create victims instead of crimes that don't.
Yeah, man, we want police. We want people to protect our communities and maintain the peace. That's not what's going on right now, though. We need to get back to that. I think we
need more time to get to the rape kits they got stacking up on their walls.
Exactly. We can fund the war on drugs, but we can't fund rape kits.
The fuck out of here, right?
You know how many millions of dollars these police departments get, and they cannot find these rape victims offenders? Disgusting. It's disgusting.
They have DNA, for fuck's sake, in most cases. I mean,
well, we look forward to the rest of everything you got going on. Everybody should follow you guys with this more tour. I'm excited to see what's happening, even though we won't get it till after the election now, supposedly. We'll see what happens.
But stay tuned. I think that there's a lot of pressure in both parties to legalize cannabis, take it off the Controlled Substance Act. There's a lot of good that would come out of the MORE Act, because states would be able to do interstate transfers. Businesses that are in the cannabis industry can use banks now, because currently they can't bank with any major bank.
The discrimination within the industry is they can't even have firearms on site to protect their business. Like a liquor store can have a gun under the counter, and generally does. Okay. You can't have that. You get to have a guy with a taser at best sitting at your door.
It's maybe some mace.
And you got weed in there. You got things people want to steal, right?
It's a hot commodity, man.
Come on, man. It's insane.
So there is a lot of good things that would come out of the MORE Act, but my one complaint is they're going to tax us and use our money to fund the war on drugs. Yeah. And that's my only gripe.
If that tax has to be... If
they change that, I think I'd be celebrating.
I want the taxes to be allocated back to the people who were affected by this. And that's it. Right. And until you revamp the police department and show the communities a police department that actually cares about their community again, you've got no right giving them these funds. Absolutely not, especially right now, what's going on. So that needs to be looked at pronto. And
hopefully we can use this as a stepping stone to get to the next level of decriminalizing everything else, with the understanding that it's a health issue.
It's like turning around a train, and we haven't even built the tracks yet. So
right. We'll get there.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and saying everything, updating everybody to what's really going on with the MORE Act, and we look forward to seeing you on again.
Yeah,
Cool,
we hope
man.
Adam's safe and healthy. You look great, and yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, bro.
Yeah, miss you, dude. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Hit me up. I'll see you then.
I'm the Commander-in-Chief, and I approve this message. Visit Platoon420.com today and take the pledge. I will stand tall in the face of tyranny for the best interest of myself and my community. I denounce the archaic drug laws that have made victims of people they were written to protect, and I will not support any legislation that regulates what a person puts in their body.